9 months after presidential elections in Nigeria, the main opposition party is still contesting the result. Scores of people died in the run-up to those elections, and tensions in some areas remain high. My guest today challenged President Obasanjo for the presidency and claims the outcome was fraudulent. But as a former military leader who overthrew a government in the 80s, how good are his credentials? Muhammadu Buhari, a very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you.
President Obasanjo says politicians should show gallantry and good nature in defeat. Why don't you show some?
He doesn't deserve it.
Why not?
Because the elections were not free and fair, and that is the basis of democracy itself.
Aren't you just a sour loser?
No. I haven't lost.
Well, you have. According to the result, the Nigerian Electoral Commission declared the result, and you lost.
We are contesting that result. We are still in court.
You're contesting, but you're not going to win, are you?
I am going to win.
President Obasanjo polled double the number of votes that you did. You say it's a fraudulent result. Couldn't have been fraudulent to the tune of 12 million votes, could it?
It is.
What's your evidence?
It's in the courts.
Well, give me an idea. What is your evidence?
There are states that elections were not held. In states where elections were held, results were changed. Either the boxes were snatched, exchanged, or stuffed with fraudulent votes, voters' cards. And this is what we are contesting in the courts.
Well, you're giving me a picture of some irregularities. Many people, many of the observers accept that there were some irregularities, but the Commonwealth itself called this historic, a landmark transfer of power from one civilian administration to another, said it was a step forward for democracy. Why can't you accept the verdict of the Commonwealth observers?
It is in the minority. The European and the American observer teams have a more credible report.
Well, let's take the American report from the International Republican Institute, for instance. It said the IRI does not believe there is sufficient cause to doubt the announced electoral outcomes in most of the locations observed. So they're saying it's okay, there were some irregularities, but it's okay. It congratulated the people of Nigeria on their efforts to conduct a peaceful and meaningful election. That's not tearing holes in it. That's not saying the whole thing was a fraud or a sham the way you are.
Not the whole thing, not absolutely the whole thing, but most of it was fraudulent. We are supposed to have a representative in every polling booth, in every state of the Federation. And definitely, people were not allowed to stay at the polling booth to supervise the elections effectively. And
so there were some irregularities, but you lost resoundingly. It wasn't a close-run election. It wasn't a few thousand or even a few million votes. It was 12 million votes. That is an enormous amount of fraud that you are alleging. In the papers that you filed in court, you say that the majority of the votes, if not all the votes, scored for President Obasanjo were not valid ones. That is a huge claim to make. You're basically saying he didn't win a single vote properly.
Not a single vote, but
well,
as I told you,
the majority of the votes, if not all the votes scored for him, were not valid ones. That's a quote from the documents you filed in court.
Yes, and that's what we are proceeding to prove.
But that's patently a ridiculous challenge, isn't it? That he didn't win a single vote or may not have won a single vote properly? That's patently ridiculous, isn't it?
Not single. Not single. Certainly, the majority of the result announced was fraudulent. It was fraudulent. And we are in the process of proving that in the court. And we are satisfied with our presentation to the court so far.
Well, you would say that, wouldn't you?
Yes, but I wouldn't say it if we had been producing in the court in terms of evidence, it couldn't stand.
If the vote had been rigged the way you suggest it has been rigged, there would be massive civil disobedience, massive strikes. As the president's campaign manager put it, if the results didn't conform to the votes, there would have been a spontaneous reaction. Nigerians are not sheep who need to be incited.
We stopped our people from demonstrating.
Really?
We did.
That's a first, isn't it?
Well, we went out. If you could recall the last election on the 3rd of May, in most part of the southeast and south-south and north central, there were no elections. People boycotted the vote. But we went around, we spoke on the radio for people to please come out and vote for the House of Assemblies. And less than 25% of Nigerians voted for that election.
Surely, Mr. Buhari, you should be complaining more about the violence that accompanied the election, the deaths, the number of people who were forced out of their homes and had to flee the areas where they live, rather than the fact that you didn't win an election which a number of observers think, all right, was flawed, but was basically the right result. Shouldn't you be complaining about the violence more?
Well, part of the process of the court action is complaining about the violence. We have taken people who were shot before the judges, before the panel. They saw them. We are going to produce people whose relatives were killed.
What about the violence that your party engaged in?
My party did not involve in violence. My party did not. We tried.
You're telling me seriously that none of your supporters engaged in any violence whatsoever?
It's impossible in the circumstances because people were standing up and they were being shot. They have to run away. If other people hit them with sticks, they may be using their hands to hit back.
Oh, so they only fought back. They
just react. They just react to what was done to them.
You don't seriously suspect people to believe that, do you? I mean, you have Human Rights Watch.
People will believe me. People will believe me because we are producing the evidence.
Human Rights Watch, the international human rights body, says political violence has not been the exclusive preserve of the PDP, which is the president's party. The larger opposition parties, including yours, the ANPP, cannot criticize the PDP's use of violence from a position of moral authority. Their supporters, too, have carried out serious acts of violence in the pursuit of electoral victory.
The difference between us...
That's the view of an impartial human rights body.
Yes. But it's even more impartial. The evidence is more impartial when we produce it in court. And this is what we are doing. How many PDP...
Not impartial, you would say that, wouldn't you? You would accuse the president's party, the PDP.
When we produce it in court, the judges saw it. There's nothing they could do but to record the violence meted on our supporters. Let the PDP produce their own members of the party that were killed or maimed or stopped from casting their votes by the ANPP or indeed the other members of the CNPP. That's the Conference of Nigerian Political Parties.
Human Rights Watch says that little concrete action was taken against those who use violence to further their political ambitions. Mm-hmm. The perpetrators of violence and their sponsors often enjoy complete impunity for their actions, both from the official law enforcement bodies and from their own political parties. Mr. Buhari, like it or not, your party is just as much involved and implicated in violence as the president. No, that's what international observers are saying. Let me give you an example. A clash in a place called Benue in February last year between your supporters and those of the president. 7 dead in a place called Jato Aka. ANPP supporters attacked and killed the elderly father of a PDP man. They attacked him with machetes, burned his home, and at least 4 other PDP supporters were reported to be killed. Who carried out that violence if it wasn't your party? Here's a specific example.
That was an allegation. That was an allegation. What we are doing...
Well, you deny it then. Do you deny it?
We deny it.
You deny it?
We denied it.
You don't know the facts surrounding here, but you deny it anyway.
And we're in court.
You don't know the facts.
Why didn't the PDP go to court? We are going to court to prove who killed our people and the relatives of those that lost their relatives fathers, mothers, and children are going to stand before the court and testify. Let the PDP produce such people to the courts and defend themselves.
But there have been repeated clashes between your supporters and those of the President's party, the PDP. You cannot seriously expect people to believe that your party played no part in inciting this violence, that it was all the work of the PDP. You keep such an iron grip on each and every one of your supporters that you know for a fact they weren't involved in anything. It's hardly credible, is it, Mr. Buhari?
Well, you may not think it is credible, but when we go to court, we produce the evidence. That's when the credibility of allegations can be substantiated, not by just stories. It's the courts that will finally decide.
What are you going to say about November the 15th, 2002? There was an explosion at the office of the National Pilot, a weekly newspaper owned by the son of a PDP member. The building was destroyed. 5 people were injured. Human Rights Watch says the bombing of the paper was most likely politically motivated. The paper itself was unmistakably politicized as a venue for PDP propaganda. Are you telling me your people didn't do that?
Yes. Why didn't the PDP,
how do you know?
Why didn't the PDP go to court? What I'm telling you, the only arbiter that should be accepted will be the courts.
And if you lose in the courts, then you will go home and stay quiet, will you? You'll just accept defeat.
Why not? That's why we are in court.
You will accept the verdict of the court.
We will accept the verdict of the court. My party will accept the verdict of the court. That's why we are there.
People say that for someone complaining about a lack of democracy in the country, you never showed the slightest interest in democracy yourself when you were military leader. Is that fair? The Vice President says Buhari is not a Democrat. He doesn't believe in democracy. He's never believed in democracy right from the word go. He's got a point, hasn't he?
That's his personal opinion. He is in a different party with me, so he can say anything against me.
But the fact is that when you were military leader, as I pointed out earlier, from January 84 till August 85, you actually overthrew a democratically elected government. So that doesn't exactly reinforce your democratic credentials, does it?
Because we don't accept people can change.
Have you changed?
I did. With the demise of the Soviet Union, I believed that a multi-party system is the best system. But then I put the caveat, elections must be free and fair.
In your view?
In the views of all Democrats, elections must be free and fair.
So you've changed from the man in 1984 and 85 who didn't really have much time for democracy at all, did you?
There are different systems.
But you didn't, did you? I mean, people are judged on their record in politics, and this is part of your record. You can't escape from it. You overthrew a democratically elected government, doesn't it? Doesn't it enhance your democratic credentials, doesn't it?
Yes. That's a matter of opinion. But from the time I joined politics to today, I don't think nobody can fault my democratic credentials.
So you've changed your views from that time?
I changed my views
and when you said
I have a reason for changing my views. And that's the collapse of the Soviet Union.
The reason for changing your views is that you want to get elected, isn't it? Actually.
I changed my views before I joined politics.
So the man who said, it's up to the people, if you choose the correct leadership, there won't be any need for the military regime. You don't agree with that anymore. That's what you used to say.
I agree with that. But again, that caveat is the fundamental issue. Elections must be free and fair. Where elections are not free and fair, there is no social justice, because people are not allowed to elect their leaders.
But what separated the time when you took power in 84? What separated you from any other despot or dictator around the world who said that democracy wasn't working, so he just had to come in and take the reins of power himself? What separated you from any other old despot?
The performance of any particular government.
You said at the time the military came in when it was absolutely necessary and the elected people had failed the country.
That's right. And we proved it.
Do you still think that would be justified? So you haven't changed your views?
Well, where a government does not perform, and the evidence is clearly there, you don't follow the system, you follow the operators.
But who are you to make that judgment? Who are you to make that judgment?
I was in a position to make it.
You were a military officer. You weren't elected by anybody.
Well, those who elected will rule the country. And the military is part of the Nigerian elite.
You weren't elected to take over the government. You were elected to loyally serve the state. And you didn't.
Yes, because those who are serving the state failed to loyally serve the state.
Let's be honest, the military came in your case, because of your utter disregard for democracy and your burning ambition for power. That's why you took over, didn't you?
No. I took over because my country was being mismanaged, and we proved that the country was being mismanaged.
You proved it to your satisfaction. You couldn't even prove it to the satisfaction of your fellow officers, who in turn overthrew you in August '85 and flung you in jail, didn't they?
But what did they do to the country? They ruined the country. They absolutely ruined the country.
What did you do? What did you do to the country? I mean, you wouldn't even fix the timetable for a handover to democracy. That's why they overthrew you. You were so enjoying your power, you were so glorying in your own power, that you had no intention of ever handing over to a civilian administration.
This is what they said. But we stabilized the economy. When we came in, nobody knew how much Nigeria was owing. The workers were owing about 9 months' areas of salary. The naira was going down. This was when we came in. And there was so much insecurity in the country. For the 20 months we were around, we refused to devalue the naira. We were paying the debt, medium and long-term debts, we were paying it.
You imprisoned some 500 politicians,
we did not take any more debt. We did not devalue the naira. We paid the areas of salaries. We made the country more secure.
But you flung a lot of people in jail. It was a pretty haphazard campaign against corruption. The well-connected got off because they could buy their way out, and others were imprisoned on long terms, and some people were executed.
That's not correct.
That's what the U.S. Library of Congress says. Some people were executed or given long jail terms. Others got off completely if they were well-connected. That's exactly what the Americans did.
3 people were executed after due processes of investigations for participating in hard drug transactions. Otherwise, politically, nobody was executed. Nobody was politically executed.
You took some bizarre measures, didn't you? You tried to make people stand in orderly bus queues at the threat of being whipped by the military. Why would you do a thing like that?
There was so much exaggeration.
You never did that.
No, I didn't say I didn't do it, but I didn't order to be whipped, people to be whipped. But if you go out now, we have developed that culture of orderliness in a chaotic society.
What business is it of the government how people stand in a bus queue?
Orderliness.
When you've got massive corruption, massive poverty.
That's right.
And you're worrying about people standing in bus queues?
It's part of the process of disciplining a society. That's why we have a zonal tribunal where corrupt individuals are being charged, and some were successfully prosecuted. It was not mere allegation. Documentary evidence were produced for those who stole public funds, and they were punished. Those who felt they will never be punished for stealing public funds.
Mr. Buhari, how much of a commitment was it to democracy, your Decree 4, which drastically limited freedom of the press at that time, criminalized the publication of any story which embarrassed the government official or caused disaffection among the public, even if it was true? How much of a commitment was that to democracy?
Well, there is no need for anybody to publish a story that will embarrass a public officer without cross-checking the story. This is what you do. Why do Nigerians...
What if the story is true? What if the story is true?
Then the public officer will be punished.
Then what? But the public officer
will be punished.
You can still publish the story. Why shouldn't you publish the story if it's true?
No, you publish it when it is true, not speculate.
But you were criminalizing the publication of any story which embarrassed the government official, whether it was true or not.
We don't want a diversion of our attention from the main problem of the country. We don't know how much we are owing. Our currency was sliding. The economy is being ruined.
That's a terrible excuse for taking away one of the basic freedoms of the press, which is to be able to report what is true.
We don't stop publishing what is the truth.
You put journalists in jail. You stifled criticism wherever you could.
For those who have been paid to publish lies against government, against officials, to cause the destruction of the serious issue before the nation.
Mr. Buhari, if you had got elected as president, how would you have ensured